Hey everyone, so I just finished my blog for this month on my website, which you can read right here if you want to. Um, and it talks a lot about where my inspiration comes from as a pianist, composer, songwriter, and producer. Um, and my thought process was kind of interesting. I I kind of went into at the beginning a little bit about when you're posting your very first single or your first album. Um, Anyone who's done it for the first time knows that if you're releasing, especially if you're releasing it through someone like CD Baby or another distributor who asks, like, what other artists do you sound like? What's your genre? And for the first time release, that can be for some people a bit intimidating to figure that out, right? Like, oh, well, I don't know who else do I sound like, right? Um, it might be tempting to say something like, "Oh, I don't know, I sound like me," and well, that's ambiguous and not helpful. Or with the genre part, I can picture some people saying, "Oh, it's got a little bit like this punkish popish thing with a little bit of folk and some ballady stuff thrown in," which is very messy and ambiguous. Um, and and the reason I kind of started my thought process out like that was because a lot of the time, the people who we find out we sound like aren't the same people who inspire us. Um, my first album release, I asked probably 12 dozen or so. I don't even remember if it was actually 12. Like just somewhere around like a dozen or so people. Like basically saying, "Hey, could you review my music and let me know who you think I sound like?" I asked people, "What do you think?" Because my best guess is just me, and I'm too close to it, right? I need to ask someone else's opinion. And I heard back from more than one person that my music sounds a lot like a mixture of Kenneth Cope and Owl City, with my like kind of contemporary Christian style. Um, to be honest, I kind of think it sounds a little more like an indie contemporary Christian kind of thing. But it was interesting because I'm like, oh, well, I like Owl City, and I like Kenneth Cope, but I realized I don't really get a lot of direct inspiration from them. A lot of my inspiration comes from, at least in the classical realm, people like Beethoven. In the modern scene, a lot of it comes from artists like John Schmidt, Switchfoot. I mentioned them a lot of times in the past. The Script, film scores like Hans Zimmer, Harry Gregson Williams, uh, Steve, is that his first name? Jablonsky. I think it's Steve Jablonsky, who did the Transformers music. And, I have never been told like I sound like any of them, which, great, But it's interesting to me because, it's just something I wanted to shoot out there that you don't always sound like the people who inspire you. And that's okay. Um, a lot of the times in the world of composition and songwriting, uh, over the years when you've had a lot of time to kind of get conditioned to different styles and different artists, uh, you kind of have a bit of a hodgepodge of different styles all rummaging around in your brain, and what comes out through your composition and songwriting uh, can be just its own thing entirely, um, and that's okay. Um, I had a client of mine whose father was recently listening to a song we finished producing, and you can actually hear that if you look up Lily Ellen music on Spotify. It's just Lily Ellen. But a song we recently finished of hers, called "When the Angels Come." Uh, Her dad listened to it, and he's like, "I've never heard anything like this before. It's just this like cutting edge stuff." And she told me he said that, and I was like, "Oh." The first part, I'm like, "Never heard anything like this, good or bad?" And then then he said, "This is cutting edge." I'm like, "Oh, he likes it. Okay, good." But sometimes you're gonna get that from people. "I've never heard anything like this before." Probably want to see if that's a good or a bad thing. Some cases it's not. But developing your own style, your own, niche in music is a process. It's a journey. And if you want to read the whole blog that I wrote about it, it kind of says better than I am here, what I'm saying here. But again, click here if you want to go read it and check it out. More interesting stories about some experiences I've had with feedback from what my music reminds other people of. And in the end, it really is a lot of feedback, positive and negative, that's helpful in determining, where your music speaks the most powerfully and to which kinds of audiences. So just something to think about. Check out the blog and have a great weekend, everybody.